Linda, and this is Coffee and Crime.
This podcast explores real cases involving violence, loss, and the darker side of human nature. Some details may be confronting. Listener discretion is strongly advised. In July 2015, a suitcase was discovered beside a quiet South Australian highway. Inside was a horrifying discovery that would eventually shock the entire country. But investigators would soon realise the case was connected to another mystery discovered years earlier inside the Belanglo State Forest, one of Australia's most infamous locations. And somehow, during all of it, people still believed the victim was alive. For years after Karlie Pearce-Stevenson disappeared, messages continued arriving from her phone. Family members believed she was travelling and choosing to stay away. But police would later uncover what they described as an elaborate deception hiding the truth about both Karlie and her daughter Khandalyce. Before her name became known across Australia, Karlie Pearce-Stevenson was a young mother from Alice Springs. Friends and family describe her as emotional, caring, and fiercely protective of her daughter Khandalyce, who was also affectionately known as Candles. Photos from the time show an ordinary young mother trying to create stability while navigating an increasingly unpredictable life. Eventually, Karlie began a relationship with an older man named Daniel Holdham. The pair travelled regularly across Australia, staying in motels, caravan parks, and temporary accommodation throughout the regional towns. People around them later described the relationship as unstable at times, with arguments and controlling behaviour becoming increasingly noticeable. But nobody outside the relationship fully understood what was happening behind closed doors. By late 2008, Karlie's communication with family had reportedly started changing. Calls became less frequent. Messages felt distant. At first, relatives tried to explain it away. People get busy, phones disconnect, and relationships can become strained. But eventually, concern grew serious enough that Karlie's mother reported her missing in 2009. But then the messages started arriving again. Texts from Karlie's phone claimed that she was travelling, wanted privacy, and didn't want family interfering in her life. To people who knew Karlie's lifestyle had become unstable, the explanation sadly felt believable. Over time, the missing persons report was withdrawn. For years afterwards, family members lived in uncertainty, believing that Karlie had chosen to disappear from parts of her old life. Then, nearly 7 years later, a discovery beside a lonely highway changed everything. Australian highways feel very different once you leave the cities behind. The roads become quieter. The towns grow smaller. Long stretches of scrubland pass by without another car in sight. Most people travelling those roads are focused on ordinary things, staying awake, reaching the next town, or getting home safely. Very few imagine that hidden only metres away could be evidence connected to a major investigation. In July 2015, a man travelling through rural South Australia stopped near scrubland outside the tiny town of Wynarka. Something near the roadside caught his attention: an old suitcase. At first glance, it looked abandoned. But when police opened it, investigators discovered skeletal remains belonging to a small child. The child appeared to have been hidden there for years. Police immediately launched a major investigation. Forensic teams searched the surrounding area while media coverage spread across the country. Australians became fixated on one question: who was the little girl in the suitcase? But investigators faced a devastating problem. Nobody knew her name. No obvious missing child report matched the remains. And police had no clear timeline explaining how the child had ended up abandoned beside a rural highway. As public interest grew, people began referring to the unidentified victim as the Angel of Wynarka. Police released images of clothing and other items connected to the suitcase, while forensic specialists worked desperately to identify the child. Across Australia, people followed the case closely, struggling to understand how a child could remain unidentified for so long. But while investigators focused on Wynarka, they slowly uncovered a connection to another unsolved mystery hundreds of kilometres away. Because 5 years earlier, another body had already been discovered inside Belanglo State Forest.
Quick pause here. If you're enjoying these deeper case breakdowns, there's a full extended membership version available through the website. That's where I go beyond the main narrative into structure, timelines, decision points, and the investigative layers that don't always make it into the public cut. It's all linked in the description if you want to go deeper. All right, let's get back into it.
Belanglo State Forest already carried a dark reputation inside Australia because of the backpacker murders committed by Ivan Milat during the 1990s. Even hearing the name unsettles people. The forest stretches for kilometres through isolated bushland, fire trails cutting deep into dense scrub. In 2010, human remains were discovered there. Police confirmed the remains belonged to a woman, but despite forensic examinations and repeated public appeals, investigators were unable to identify her. No strong missing persons match emerged. Eventually, the unidentified woman became known as the Angel of Belanglo, named after the angelic shirt she was found wearing. For years, her identity remained a mystery. Because of Belanglo's history, speculation surrounding the case intensified online and in the media. Some feared another serial offender. Others questioned whether the location had been deliberately chosen because of its notoriety. Police later clarified there was no evidence connecting the case to another serial killer. Still, the investigation remained deeply unsettling. An unidentified woman had effectively vanished without anyone knowing who she was or what had happened to her. For years, Investigators attempted to identify her through forensic reconstruction, missing persons databases, and national appeals, but nothing worked. At first, the police treated the Belanglo remains and the Wynarka suitcase discovery as completely separate investigations. Different victims, different states, different years. But then DNA testing changed everything. The child found inside the suitcase was biologically related to the unidentified woman discovered in Belanglo. The two victims were mother and daughter. The angel of Belanglo was identified as Karlie Pearce-Stevenson. The angel of Wynarka was identified as Khandalyce Pearce. Two separate unidentified remains. Investigations instantly became one major interstate investigation. As investigators rebuilt the timeline surrounding Karlie's disappearance, they uncovered something deeply disturbing. According to police, Karlie's identity had continued being used long after her death. Messages continued being sent from her phone. Family members received texts claiming that she was travelling or avoiding contact. Financial activity connected to Karlie also reportedly continued. To outsiders, it appeared Karlie was still alive somewhere in Australia, and for years that illusion worked. People who loved Karlie believed that she had deliberately chosen to distance herself from family. The emotional impact of that deception was enormous. Relatives spent years unsure whether Karlie was safe, avoiding contact, or simply trying to start over somewhere else. But investigators later alleged the communications were part of a deliberate effort to conceal what had happened. One detail in particular shocked the public. Court proceedings later revealed claims that someone had attempted to physically impersonate Karlie after her disappearance. According to reports, a woman in a wheelchair was allegedly used during an interaction intended to convince people Karlie was still alive. That revelation transformed public understanding of the case. Investigators believed a false version of Karlie's life had been maintained for years after her death. While messages continued arriving from Karlie's phone, both Karlie and Khandalyce remain hidden in separate locations hundreds of kilometres apart. One inside Belanglo State Forest, the other one beside a highway near Wynarka. As investigators pieced together the timeline, focus increasingly shifted toward Daniel Oldham. Police examined financial records, travel movements, witness statements, and inconsistencies surrounding the disappearances. Witnesses later described instability, controlling behaviour, and abuse within the relationship. As the evidence mounted, Oldham was arrested and charged. The case attracted enormous national attention, not only because of the victims, but because of the years-long deception investigators believed followed their deaths. One of the most confronting discoveries involved photographs investigators alleged had been taken of Karlie after she had already died. Police said the images became significant evidence during the investigation and helped to reconstruct the timeline surrounding the case. For detectives, the photographs added another disturbing layer to an already devastating investigation. In 2017, Daniel Holdom pleaded guilty to the deaths of both Karlie Pearce-Stevenson and Khandalyce Pearce. Court proceedings later revealed deeply distressing details surrounding the case. Investigators believe that Karlie died in 2008. The sentencing judge described the violence inflicted on her as callous and sadistic. Khandalyce survived for a period after her mother's death before she was also killed. Prosecutors further alleged that the child was either being abused or was about to be abused at the time of her death. Police also believed significant effort had gone into concealing both crimes separately to prevent investigators linking the disappearances together. And for years, it worked. During sentencing, the judge described the crimes as displaying appalling depravity and very great heinousness. Holdom received life sentences. But even after sentencing, the emotional weight of the case never disappeared. Because this investigation was never only about violence. It was about erasure. A woman disappearing while somebody else continued controlling her identity. A child remaining unidentified for years inside a suitcase beside a highway. And a family manipulated into believing their loved ones were still alive somewhere in Australia. The guilty plea finally ended one of Australia's most haunting unidentified remains investigations, but it also confirmed something deeply confronting. For years, Australians had been searching for two unknown victims, while a false version of Karlie Pearce-Stevenson continued existing through messages, financial activity, and deception. There are some cases remembered because of mystery, others because of the details investigators uncover years later. But the deaths of Karlie Pearce-Stevenson and Khandalyce Pearce remain haunting because of the years they spent hidden while ordinary life continued around them. Cars passed the highway near Wynarka every day. Visitors moved through Belanglo State Forest without realising human remains rested nearby. And during all of it, the illusion that Karlie was still alive continued. A mother hidden inside one of Australia's darkest forests. A child abandoned beside a lonely highway. And one of the most chilling deception cases ever uncovered in Australia. Not every case finds closure. Not every question gets answered. And sometimes the truth stays buried long after the headlines fade. This has been Coffee and Crime AU. For deeper into the case, visit Coffee and Crime AU online. Until next time.